Extending an invitation to my husband's manager transformed into an evening I will always regret, a tale of true infidelity. I offered an invitation to my husband's manager for a unique experience. He was caught off guard. A touching narrative that explores profound feelings and the intricate nature of love. I stood quietly by the large window of my Chicago penthouse, watching the city lights unfold like a stream of unvoiced desires. The far-off skyscrapers sparkled, each glint murmuring tales of yearning and profound feelings. In the midst of life's tumult, souls entwine, ensnared in a tapestry of fervent bonds that transcend all limits. In this shimmering realm, I became a lone silhouette, my breaths echoing through the expansive void of my dwelling. The glass of red wine sat in my hand, the deep crimson liquid shimmering gently in the dim light. I abstained from drinking, not due to a lack of craving, but from a profound apprehension that once the intoxicating liquid flowed down my throat, I would relinquish the delicate hold I maintained on the stormy emotions surging within me. Isolation is a concept that seems simple at first glance, yet it bears an immeasurable weight. Julian, my husband, was once again away on a business trip. This journey seemed to stretch on indefinitely, and despite his presence beside me, I remained haunted by a deep sense of emptiness that refused to fade. His absence had intricately entwined itself within the very essence of my being, shifting from a vivid creation into a haunting reminder of what had been, each day drenched in the bittersweet pain of yearning. I found myself pondering the early days of our union, when our passion thrived, vibrant and electric. Julian embodied everything I held dear, the steadfast presence I believed would forever accompany me, steering me through each challenge we encountered side by side. As the days passed, his dreams grew larger, pulling him away from me, while I faded into a mere echo of the woman I used to be. The evening meal had devolved into a monotonous ritual, devoid of its once cherished meaning. A woman lingered at an elongated, forsaken table, ensnared in contemplation, as a lone plate and a shimmering glass of wine caught the faint glow of the subdued light. As time went on, our once lively conversations faded into mere text exchanges, and even our greetings lost their warmth, becoming empty formalities. I extended my hand, investing my emotions into lengthy messages and delving further with my inquiries. But with every effort, a wave of inadequacy enveloped me, rendering me more adrift than I had been prior. Confronting that truth proved to be a formidable challenge for me. In the shadows of my marriage, I found myself lost, and with every effort to stifle my emotions, the stark truth revealed itself with increasing sharpness. The steady tick-tock of the wall clock echoed through the quiet apartment, a poignant reminder of time's relentless passage. I stood up, seized the bottle of wine, and allowed its deep, velvety liquid to cascade into the glass. Every drop carried a soft murmur of desire and unvoiced dreams. The night in Chicago enveloped the city in a crisp embrace, while the room throbbed with an eerie heat. The night enveloped me in its heavy cloak, yet the sweet surrender of sleep remained just out of reach, leaving me in a state of restless longing. The evenings stretched on, a tapestry of solitude woven with haunting reflections that stirred within me, steadfastly resisting the embrace of sleep in the quiet of the night. Exhausted and yearning, the sudden chime of the doorbell pulled me sharply from my thoughts. A crease appeared on my forehead, a blend of intrigue and a touch of unease washing over me, as I contemplated who could possibly be coming at this unforeseen time. As I grasped the handle and nudged the door open, my breath hitched at the sight of Miles, Julian's senior manager, poised just beyond the entrance. He wore a billowing gray coat, his hair disheveled, suggesting the burden of a day steeped in unvoiced desires. Miles traversed the world with an irresistible charm, his eyes sharp and imbued with a mysterious coolness that captivated and unsettled those in his presence. "Forgive me for intruding," he murmured, his voice deep and resonant. "Julian asked me to fetch some documents." I exhaled softly, shifting my body to invite him nearer. Miles had entered this apartment on previous occasions, yet each visit resonated with a haunting echo of something profound, something unarticulated that hung in the atmosphere. He often undertook tasks for Julian, whether through impromptu meetings or by casually stopping by to gather documents or relay messages. However, this evening, An unmistakable change permeated the air. I watched Miles quietly as he entered the living room, removing his coat and casually tossing it over the chair. He paused, an unexpected serenity surrounding him, as if the very fabric of time had thickened in his company. His eyes flickered to the glass of wine I held, then settled on my face, a moment elongating into something electric and unarticulated. Could the hours of longing stretch on indefinitely? Miles asked, his voice tinged with a blend of curiosity and yearning. I exhaled softly, trying to conceal the chaos brewing inside. A sense of familiarity washed over me. He stayed quiet, his fingers gently gliding along the edges of the file resting on the table, turning the pages with a soft curiosity, as if revealing secrets concealed within. His presence filled the room, a captivating force that was hard to overlook. Miles was markedly different from Julian. An irresistible force emanated from him, a daring charm that ensnared my senses, and a magnetic presence that naturally attracted others, heightening my awareness of his influence on those nearby. "I've never understood it," Miles remarked abruptly, his eyes locked on the file. "How could Julian stand to leave a woman like you alone so often?" I paused, my fingers tightening around the glass. His words bore a significance that transcended simple observation. They murmured of uncharted possibilities. It was an invitation that could not be ignored. I let out a soft laugh, concealing the turmoil brewing inside. He is absorbed in his own world. Duties overshadow everything else. Miles closed the file and finally locked eyes with me. "What of your concealed desires? How do you gauge your standing in his affections?" A dense silence enveloped us, saturated with unexpressed emotions. Words eluded me. A fragment of my being urged me to cut this conversation short. Yet another, more secretive part that I was hesitant to confront found itself captivated by the allure of Miles's words. I knew I should protect my heart from their influence. I recognized the necessity of preserving my boundaries. Yet, the solitude of the nights, the mundane exchanges with Julian, and the solitary dinners had rendered me more vulnerable than I had ever been. "There are moments that linger in the shadows, Miles," I whispered, my words dissipating into the air. He tilted his head, a teasing half-smile dancing at the corners of his lips. "Though we strive to keep them at bay, there are moments when they invade our hearts with an undeniable fervor." A thick tension filled the room, altering the very atmosphere surrounding them. An unvoiced tension hung in the atmosphere around us. My heart pounded wildly, and I despised that Miles could sense it. I stepped back, craving distance between us. "Have you acquired the documents? Maybe it's time for me to depart." Miles moved with a purposeful elegance, relishing each instant as though it held a hidden truth. He stood up, gripping his jacket firmly, a blend of desire and uncertainty churning inside him. Yet, just before he turned away, he paused directly in front of me. The connection between us was so intense that I could feel the closeness between us. "Consider the words I shared with you tonight," Miles murmured gently before he turned and stepped out into the night. I lingered in that moment, the door gently closing behind me, while my thoughts remained unrestrained, aching for what had just slipped away. I wished to encapsulate it with that fervor. I longed to wipe that moment from my mind, to diminish its importance. As I peered into the far-off mirror, a stirring within me unveiled that everything had transformed. It was an exhilarating allure, something I felt compelled to pursue, yet understood I ought not to have welcomed. Yet, I found myself unable to shake the thought that after that night, nothing would ever be the same again. I would turn away from Miles's intense stare, dismiss the allure of his soft whispers, and carry on with my life as it had been, untouched and unchanged. A woman, enveloped in the stillness of the night, yearns for her husband's return, feeling the weight of solitude pressing against her heart. Yet I discovered my error. In the days that ensued, my thoughts began to orbit around Miles with an intensity one could not control. It was not a choice I made, but an undeniable pull that ensnared me. His presence transformed the air in the apartment, thickening it with an unvoiced intensity that awakened something profound within me. The atmosphere became increasingly oppressive, heavy with unexpressed emotions. Our exchanges hung in the air, elongating into moments steeped in unarticulated tension. The exchanged glances bore an intensity that suggested unvoiced truths. I tried to persuade myself that it was simply a creation of my imagination. I found myself adrift in the depths of my thoughts, crafting significance from the strands of what appeared to be mere nonsense. Yet, each time I turned my gaze elsewhere, I felt Miles's eyes resting on me, as if he were waiting for a moment that might alter the course of everything. That evening, I found myself lingering in the kitchen, idly swirling my glass of wine, trying to unravel the tempest of feelings churning inside me. Julian's words echoed in my thoughts as he announced his decision to prolong his visit for another week. His voice held a steady calm, an unyielding mask that revealed nothing of the yearning that had enveloped me in his absence. A deep sigh slipped from my lips as I raised the glass, the burden of unvoiced desires hanging palpably in the atmosphere. Just as I prepared to savor that fleeting moment, a voice cut through the silence from behind me. "Could you please tell me why there's this distance between us?" A wave of surprise swept through me. Miles stood in the doorway, his intense gaze appearing to delve into the very core of my thoughts. I clutched the glass firmly, fighting to keep my voice steady. In a fog of confusion, I struggled to capture the true meaning behind your words. Miles let out a soft chuckle, his half-smile revealing unvoiced desires and the excitement of the forbidden. He drew nearer, the distance that had once lingered between us dissolving into nothingness. Unvoiced realities, heavy with concealed feelings, hang in the atmosphere, poised for a significant encounter. His breath caressed my skin, kindling a fire deep inside me. The kitchen surrounded me, its walls tightening, intensifying the burden of unarticulated desires. The cadence of my heart reverberated within me, a fervent drumbeat of desire and unvoiced aspirations. This sensation enveloped me in a deep-seated apprehension. I must take a moment to pause and contemplate. I understand the necessity of creating space between us. I ought to have struggled more fiercely to uphold the separation that existed. Yet I held back. Instead, I found myself immobilized, entranced by Miles's gaze as though I were a lost soul ensnared in a storm. He lifted the glass with a deliberate calm in a tender touch, before slowly retracting it from my hold and setting it softly on the counter. A tremor ran through me, each nerve igniting with a blend of eagerness and trepidation. "My dearest Miles," I whispered, the words lingering hesitantly on the brink of my tongue. Should I caution him? Or perhaps remind myself? He had stolen my chance to decide. As he stepped nearer, in a heartbeat, he leaned in gently, the air thick with emotion, igniting a flame I had never anticipated. In that fleeting moment, every shred of logic crumbled. I should have pulled away from him. I ought to have shouted, conveying that his actions were profoundly misguided. I yielded to the moment, shutting my eyes and letting I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by the emotion of the moment like a long-hidden secret at last revealed. Miles's hand glided over my waist, pulling me closer. A spark of emotion surged within me. His kiss lingered, imbued with a subtle intensity that hinted at unvoiced desires. He seemed to grasp the profound nature of my yearning, the magnetic force that drew me to him, both compelling and inescapable. It was as if he could perceive the reality that lay within me, a reality I had long feared to face. The apartment was enveloped in stillness, the silence thick, interrupted only by the cadence of my breath and the pounding of my heart. Then everything fell apart into disarray. That night, the lines that separated us blurred. The next morning, I rose, weighed down by a profound sense of regret that engulfed me. I reclined in stillness, my mind adrift, eyes fixed on the ceiling while Miles slumbered serenely next to me. The atmosphere was heavy with the room still held traces of the evening. The unmade bed echoed the weight of my choices of a decision I could never reverse. I adjusted slightly to capture the delicate features of his face, gently lit by the tender glow of dawn. Miles exuded a sense of calm, a tranquil exterior concealing the storm within. He appeared to embrace the occurrences of the previous night as an inevitability. Yet for me it was not. I cocooned myself in the blanket, feeling a disquieting strangeness beneath my skin. Everything I once cherished, all my convictions, have vanished. I discovered myself in an unexpected realm, one I had never imagined I would explore. However, the most chilling truth was that the present moment was merely a beginning. Miles faced his innermost feelings without a trace of doubt. He had seen my fragility, and I realized he was intent on preserving that moment in his mind. I stood up, collecting my disarrayed clothes from the earth, and donned them silently, the heaviness of unexpressed emotions lingering around us. I yearned to disappear from this place, to retrieve a fragment of myself that had been lost in the aftermath of the previous night, a fragment of my being lingered and scathed by this decision. Yet the moment had eluded me. As I cast a backward glance at Miles, sensing it might be our last exchange, a transient smile flickered across his lips. Those lips sparked a flame deep inside. A complicated mix of feelings stirred within me. His smile hinted at concealed realities. He had emerged victorious. Before I knew it, all that I cherished had vanished. I thought I could bury it deep inside. I thought that by keeping my composure and sticking to the rhythm of my daily existence, I could hide the deep change brewing within me. Yet I had underestimated Julian's complexity. He appeared earlier than I expected. A week later, cloaked in darkness, his message reached me. The business trip wrapped up ahead of schedule. I'll be back this evening. My eyes lingered on the glow of my phone screen. A profound weight descends within me. Shouldn't joy accompany this moment? As I acknowledge my husband's return, an odd tension tightens in my chest, a blend of relief and something altogether different. Still, an unsettling grip clutches my heart. A disquieting anxiety entwined itself within the core of my being. I had wronged Julian, and the burden of that hidden truth clung to me like a persistent shadow, stirring a whirlwind of emotions I could no longer suppress. Even more distressing was the gnawing doubt about my ability to keep it hidden from him. That evening, as Julian crossed the threshold, an unmistakable spark flared to life within me. He had transformed. He was no longer the same. It was an elusive spark, a profound depth in his gaze that awakened something profound within. The depth of his gaze ignited a tumult of emotions within me, a blend of excitement and unease. "Is everything all right with you?" he asked gently, setting his luggage down with a trace of uncertainty. A surge of astonishment enveloped me. His question floated with an air of indifference, but the gravity of his voice betrayed a profound yearning. Truly, he was voicing an intense wish. "What stirs your intrigue?" I fought to keep my voice steady, yet the texture of my skirt felt like a tether as my fingers clutched it more firmly. Julian paused, ensnared in a moment thick with unvoiced desire. His gaze lingered on me, suspended in the quiet, as if measuring the gravity of unsaid words. When he moved nearer, he wrapped me in a tender embrace, awakening a torrent of emotions long kept at bay. I remained motionless, ensnared in a wave of profound yearning. I ought to have held him tightly. The sight of his return should have ignited a spark of happiness within me. A wave of guilt surged within me, intertwining with the fear that my racing heartbeat might reveal my concealed desire. As he stepped back, his gaze lingered on me, more piercing than before. "You've transformed," Julian murmured, his voice a mere breath. I remained motionless, ensnared in a moment brimming with profound yearning. "What evokes such feelings within you?" He gazed at me as if seeking something concealed that ignited his own desire. A sense of uncertainty envelopes me. An unmistakable change lingers in the atmosphere. I let out a quiet chuckle, trying to lighten the palpable tension. Maybe fatigue has woven itself into my very being. Julian held his tongue, a tempest of unexpressed emotions churning inside him. However, as we partook in the meal, an unmistakable warmth wrapped around me, his eyes resting on me with a fervor that awakened something profound. He had never been one to probe the mysteries that flickered in the periphery of his existence. He had always placed his faith in my unwavering devotion, never once questioning it. Yet, in that instant, I sensed the intensity of his gaze, stirring something profound within me. What filled me with the greatest dread was his sudden silence, as he chose not to probe any deeper. He watched in silence, a figure shrouded in desire, waiting for the precise moment to reveal his concealed passions. The subsequent days were charged with an electric intensity, a tangible yearning that resonated deep within. Julian had stopped asking questions, yet his silence spoke volumes, enveloping the atmosphere in an uneasy tension. Every dinner hung in a heavy silence, laden with unexpressed emotions. Each tender touch sent ripples through my being, rekindling a flame I believed had long been snuffed out. I found myself at the edge, heart pounding, longing for that gentle breeze to propel me into the uncharted. Yet, I came to understand that I was not solitary in my metamorphosis. Julian started to arrive home earlier, as if compelled by an invisible pull, a murmur of something deeply hidden awakening inside him. He regarded me with a fresh intensity, no longer ensnared by the diversions of his job as he once had been. His thoughts eluded my understanding, yet the air was thick with his unspoken anticipation. Then came that pivotal day. One evening, as I entered the living room, I discovered Julian on the couch, his gaze deep and penetrating. On the table rested an envelope, its contents murmuring tales of desire and unvoiced aspirations. My heart quickened, a surge of yearning enveloping me as I recognized the treasures within photographs. I moved closer, hands quaking, irresistibly drawn to one in particular, as if compelled by an invisible pull. It was I who sensed the awakening within, a yearning that transcended logic and flirted with the boundaries of propriety. It was Miles, concealed in a softly illuminated nook of a refined cafe, lingering in the obscurity of a parking lot, and meandering through the hushed, personal corridors of a hotel. The visions lacked the sharpness required to be unequivocally persuasive. Every fleeting instant possessed the potential to reveal the entire story. To an untrained observer, it might seem like a mere coincidence, but for Julian, it was anything but ordinary. He grasped the very essence of my being. A wave of vulnerability enveloped me as I raised my eyes. Julian radiated an eerie calmness, yet the fervor in his stare held me in thrall. "Is there something you wish to share?" he asked, his voice soft and remote. I opened my mouth, but silence wrapped around me like a shroud. Perhaps this was the moment to reveal my innermost truth. Still, I knew in my heart that despite my facade, Julian would ultimately discover the reality within himself. At last, I released a breath, weighed down by a heavy regret for the events that had unfolded. Julian closed his eyes for a moment, a futile effort to contain the storm of feelings raging inside him. However, when he finally opened them, I saw not anger, but a deep and palpable disappointment. He spoke softly, a trace of nostalgia lacing his voice. "I once held the belief that, despite the myriad changes surrounding us, you would forever be the one person I could depend on." His words pierced through me, leaving a tender ache in my heart. An intense compulsion surged within me, driving me to articulate my feelings, to ask for forgiveness, and to unveil my reality. However, beneath the surface, I recognized that words alone could never alleviate the burden of my deeds. Julian stood, his actions measured, as he extended the envelope towards me, our fingertips grazing in a brief encounter that sent a tremor coursing through my being. "I extended to you the chance to unveil your innermost truths, but you opted to remain silent." He shot me a lingering look, a fleeting moment frozen in time, before ultimately turning away. "Tomorrow, my lawyer will be in touch with you." I found myself completely entranced. Julian, however, kept his back to me. He turned and departed, leaving me alone in the expansive, empty void, with a lingering ache that resonated in the stillness. This experience reflects the complexities of our present connection. Miles slipped away into the darkness soon after. Silence hangs heavy, a chasm where conversation once flowed. To him, it seemed a transient instant, a fragile waltz that had arrived at its concluding chord. His unexpected presence caught me off guard. I discovered myself unable to. 1 month later, the documents that would alter the course of events arrived. There was merely a subdued acquiescence, not a rejection. Only the stark, lifeless pages linger, resonating with the deep sense of loss for something that once flourished, now irrevocably shattered. As I peered into the mirror, my reflection awakened something profound within. The visage looking back was that of a stranger, a haunting echo of what had once existed. All that I once cherished had eluded my grasp. The most painful truth was that I could never reclaim what had slipped away.